doing a job that usually men do. It's not considered until quite recently a female job, really, being a war correspondent. But honestly, I've felt in my job that being a woman has always been a bonus, because it's given me a very intimate access into a part of life that's often overlooked or maybe just not considered interesting by my male colleagues. You know, there's a joke amongst war correspondents that when men report on war, they report on the ammunition and how many planes flew and how many troops there were and what their positions were. And women report on the people that they find there. And that's definitely always been true in my case. Somebody at my table just said, "Why would you do something like this?" Not mentioning any names. And I sort of think, why not? I grew up moving around. My father worked for a bank, and every couple of years we would move to a new country. I lived in Europe, and then I lived back in Canada, and then I lived in Saudi Arabia. So I'm what you would call a third culture kid, kind of at home everywhere and nowhere. I was always the new girl, which made me, at the end of the day, very comfortable being the outsider in situations, and that has definitely helped me in my work. But I always have also felt like I'm missing some vital piece of information, like is there something everybody else knows about belonging and having a home that I don't have because I was always moved. So I think that this peripatetic upbringing, coupled with a questionable relationship to authority that I've always had, because if the rules changed every couple of years, why would you follow them, have been perfect tools for me as a reporter. And my journalism really has sprung out of a massive curiosity that I've always had. I really feel that I want to understand everything viscerally. I don't just understand things through hearing them on the news. I myself want to go and feel it and smell it and taste it and live what people going through these things are living. And this curiosity has always overridden any fear that I might have. And I have had fear. To say that I haven't had fear would be a total lie. There have been many nights that I've lain awake, tossing and turning, and just willing myself to just go, no, cancel your trip, just don't go. And then somehow this curiosity has always just pushed me forward. And I also have always felt sort of a responsibility to the people that I know in these situations to try to give them a voice. I didn't start out reporting on conflict. I was sent to Iraq on a magazine assignment in 2002, and I made a film about a little girl there who was 5, called Shaima, and she was telling me about the fears that she had about the upcoming American bombing campaign as she saw it and how scared she was. And at the end of the film that I made that aired on the CBC, she crawls up the gate to her house, like she's a tiny little girl, and she looks at me and she goes, come back, inshallah, come back. And I sat in my edit suite at the CBC and I was just like, I have to go back. I mean, if she's 5 and she can do it, why can't I? So my work is just an extension of myself, trying to understand and connect with what it is to be in a particular place at a particular time, to crawl into somebody else's life. And I'm going to be sharing with you tonight some of the stories of the people that I've met doing this kind of work, because really I think my life is only interesting because of them. But before I talk too much, I'm going to start with a film that I made quite a while ago now. I chose it because it ties in very well with the issues that Narman's organization deals with. I also think it highlights some of the ways that me being a woman helps me in my work. Video journalism, and that's what I do when I make films, is basically just means that you do 3 people's job at once. Instead of having a cameraman and a reporter and a producer, you just have me with a camera. So that it makes me much less obtrusive. So usually, if you're walking down a street in Afghanistan with 3 people, you're going to get a lot more attention than if it's just me. And it also allows, I think, a real intimacy with the subject. They don't, they're not distracted by a whole crew. It's just myself and them. And so I feel like I can paint a sort of closer portrait in a way than I could otherwise. And anyway, I will show you the film.
2 years ago, the war in Afghanistan was drawing to a close. By late December of 2001, all of the major cities had fallen, and the Taliban were in retreat. But today, as Canadian troops try to help stabilize Afghanistan, major hurdles remain. Taliban supporters still prowl the countryside, and Osama bin Laden remains at large. There are other problems. The women of Afghanistan continue to live in fear, despite promises they would be free from oppression. Even in the capital of Kabul, women take their lives into their hands if they challenge male authority. Still, there are pockets of resistance and change. Tara Sutton traveled into Afghanistan earlier this season. As a young Canadian woman, she was given a unique peek behind the veil.
After a 12-hour road trip from Pakistan, which took me through the Khyber Pass and over landscape that seemed like it had been transplanted from the surface of the moon, I arrived in Kabul. The most striking thing about the city is the level of destruction, with burned tanks, twisted metal, and bullet holes everywhere, souvenirs of 24 years of war. Whatever infrastructure there once was has been bombed and neglected. Most people live with no running water, alongside open sewers, and electricity is sporadic. Filming around Kabul, it was impossible for me not to think of the horrors that women had endured here under the Taliban, and I wondered about the effect this was having on them now. One of the most positive changes I saw was that women no longer have to sneak around in order to be educated. During the almost 5 years that the Taliban had control of Kabul, it was illegal for girls to be educated. I'm now standing in front of the Oshua Dirani School, which for the last 18 months has been educating girls. I'm about to go inside and talk to a class of 7th grade girls to find out how they're trying to make up for lost time. The school was packed. 2,500 students attend school in 3-hour shifts. Many of these girls had only been able to study secretly under the Taliban, others not at all. Because of their differing levels of education, the girls in this grade 7 class range in age from 13 to 20. I found their eagerness to learn incredibly inspiring. 16-year-old Soraya told me that she had at first attended secret school, but was then caught and forced to stop. She then spent the next 5 years confined to her house, weaving carpets. Is she sad for the years of school that she missed, or does she forget about it? The girls told me of their dreams to become doctors, judges, or journalists, and spoke passionately about wanting to rebuild their country. I had not expected to see girls playing volleyball in Afghanistan, but the girls at this school are the lucky ones, with fathers who believe it is important that their daughters be educated, and who have the means to afford it. They live in Kabul, the one area of the country where Karzai's interim government maintains a semblance of control, mostly thanks to the fact that it has the highest concentration of coalition forces. A staggering 90% of Afghan women are illiterate, and there are fundamentalist forces in the country that would like to keep things that way. When one of the students, 19-year-old Shugafa, invites me home to have dinner with her family, I see that while school is a sanctuary for her, the journey to and from is fraught with stress.
The situation of Afghanistan is not good. All of the people, when I cross the road, for example, they say different words for us, and I'm very sad. They make bad words.
So they look at you and they say things?
Yeah, they say bad words.
And how does it make you feel?
Very sad. I think this is not good action in front of the girls, in front of the women. Sometimes I advise them. Do you have, for example, do you have parents? Do you have sisters? Don't say these words for me. You have sisters. I am as the same like your sister, as the same like your cousin.
I was with her as she walked to the bus and marveled at her composure in front of the ever-prying eyes. Some men in Kabul have a way of staring at you that makes you question whether or not you should exist. And some men say things to her that are so insulting, she won't tell me what they said. Shugufah lives in a massive apartment subdivision that was built by the Soviets. They are considered pretty fancy dwellings in the scheme of things.
Hello, hello, how are
She
you?
shares this 3-room apartment with her parents and 5 siblings.
We sometimes do our homework here because it's so calm.
Shugufah excitedly tells me how if she went to school year-round, she might be able to graduate high school by the time she is 21.
I like English so much and mathematics too. Because of this matter, I want to continue my education to learn English so much. I want to be a very nice businesswoman in Kabul.
But soon the discussion turns back to her fears.
The situation of Afghanistan is not good in these days. Some Taliban, they didn't go anywhere. Some women so afraid from these people because...
She isn't sure that the Taliban will not come back to power. She knows from personal experience that members of the Taliban are still in Afghanistan. Knowing this frightens her. She says that she and other women are still terrified of being abducted by armed men. Such is the culture of violence towards women in the country. Although fear pervades nearly all aspects of life, home is at least a safe haven for Shugufah. Her 12-year-old sister Rihanna insists on dancing for me in her traditional Afghan dress. I see in them an energy and playfulness that they cannot show publicly.
Shugufah and I have stayed in touch. Actually, we're now Facebook friends. She managed to graduate at 21. She got a scholarship to business school in India. While she was there, unfortunately, she got a brain tumor, but she was able to have a successful operation, although she did lose sight in one eye. But she went back to Kabul when she was 26 and now works for an international NGO. She decided she didn't want to get married, as she felt that the pressure of having a family would maybe stop her from having a career. And we talk quite a bit. She always calls me my dear sister. So for me, all of the places that I've been to are always very much intertwined with the people that I have met in them. In Darfur, when I was in a very massive, dusty red refugee camp, sharing a straw hut with a mother hedgehog and her baby hedgehog, and it turns out baby hedgehogs also don't feel that they should let you sleep ever. I met an incredible nurse from Zimbabwe called Jessie Kanhutu, and she was in charge of the supplementary feeding center there. Supplementary feeding is a place where babies go when they're literally bags of bones because of the displacement faced by the women in the camp and the fact that they'd been widowed and often now had, all the children to take care of on their own, and their whole structure of life had been upended. The youngest children would often be the ones that would miss feedings, So they would quickly deteriorate and become very thin. And Jessie taught me that when you hear a baby cry, you say Alhamdulillah, because that means thanks be to God in Arabic, which is what they speak in Darfur, because they're getting better, Really hungry babies don't cry. So I like the way that has twisted my view of things to now think that a crying baby is a blessing. When I think of the films that I made in Fallujah, I think of two young men that I know there called Ahmed and Walid. They were both residents of Fallujah, and a friend of mine, a fellow journalist, we all shared a house together in Baghdad, brought them home one evening because he had been reporting on the bridge going into Fallujah, and it had been blocked off by the American army. One of the worst things about conflict is that it just makes planning or trying to get anything done impossible. It's like construction here on steroids. Like you never know what's going to happen. The Army will roll in and just stop everything. So these two young men had been working at a factory that their families owned outside of the city, had tried to go home, couldn't get there. My friend was reporting there. He met them. They spoke English. They were students at Baghdad University in English. He started using them as translators and then said, oh, well, if you can't get home, why don't you come back to our place and, we have a spare room. You can sleep there. They were thrilled because they could drink beer in our garden, which their devout parents didn't let them do. And then as the siege of the city continued, I started to report on it, and Ahmed became my translator and guide to the city. And because he was from there and tribally linked to many people in this town, he really protected me in ways that are just too numerable to count. We were trying to document war crimes, which is, you've got to be very accurate. You can't just accuse the U.S. Army of war crimes and try to make a case for it unless you're very intricate in your reporting. So it was grueling work. We would have to interview one person, then interview another person to make sure that corroborated. And it was also quite dangerous. At that time, I started veiling from head to toe and sneaking in and out, because even though insurgents would check everything, check our trunk, check under the car, they wouldn't go near a woman. So it was great. I could just put my camera on my lap, throw my veil over me, and I was essentially invisible. In spite of that, we always kept it light in the car while we were driving around. We had one CD of Amr Diab, who is the Egyptian pop god, playing all the time, and they would translate his syrupy romance lyrics to me. So my Arabic basically consists of war words and love words. So I know how to say hospital and bomb and tank, and then I also know my eyes, my love, my soul. But one day when we finished work and we had snuck out of the city, because you had to sneak in and then you had to sneak out again, I had to go to the bathroom, and it was kind of tricky as a woman, because in one way, Ahmed didn't want to let me out of his sight because he was so chivalrous, but then on another way, in this case, he totally wanted to let me out of his sight. And so we pulled over near this abandoned village in the desert, and it was sort of stone and mud huts that no longer had roofs on them, whatever. It was probably, had been abandoned for about 50 years. And I started to walk. I was like, this is perfect. And I started to walk into one of the huts, and suddenly I got this yank on my shirt, and I was pulled back by Ahmed. And then I realized that right in front of my face was a very thin tripwire, and that the entire village had been rigged to explode by the U.S. Army, obviously thinking it could be used as a base for insurgents. So my friend saved my life, and he risked his own life to save me. Sadly, I have lost track of Ahmed. He no longer answers the emails to his old address. I know he had gone to Syria when the civil war in Iraq turned into ethnic cleansing, and now I can't imagine that he would still want to be in Syria. I can't find him on Facebook, and I really hope that I will find this lifesaver of mine again one day. So this summer, I was in Amman, Jordan, and I was making films about Syrian and Iraqi refugees. One guy that I met there, called Abu Nabil, is a refugee from Syria, and his story really kind of blew my mind. He's the most jovial guy. He was working at a grassroots organization helping other refugees, and when he would see me with my camera, he would always joke to me that I was making Syrians Got Talent, which is a takeoff on America's Got Talent, which in the Middle East is called Arabs Got Talent. And then one day he told me the story of how he had come from Syria 2 years before. In the town of, I think he was from Homs, which was one of the first towns that the uprising started in. He was a well-known and respected lawyer. And one day his house and his car were hit by a targeted bombing from the Assad government. His wife and him were outside of the house, but his daughter was inside, his 12-year-old. The house collapsed. She was in the bathtub, so luckily she survived because I think the bathtub protected her. Now, he was targeted because he was actually defending the kids that were involved in the uprising, because he was a human rights lawyer, and so he was defending them in court, and the government decided that they would target him for this. They rushed his daughter to the hospital. She had a fractured skull, and then in the middle of the night, the doctors came in and said to him, "You have to leave. They've come looking for you. They want to finish off your daughter." So in the middle of the night, he and his wife ran out of the hospital. They took a bus, walked across the border into Jordan, took another bus to Amman, the capital city, and when the organization that he now works for found him, he was under a bridge, a sleety bridge. His daughter was unconscious. He had just the clothes on his back. Hearing this story from him, I couldn't really compare the man in front of me with someone that had been through this. And he, like a guy that's always smiling, he loves to cook, he's always doing whatever he can to help people. His daughter, luckily, has recovered. So I think that is really the answer of why I do what I do. It's meeting people like him with huge hearts and souls that give me faith in humanity and the greatness that we're all capable of. For me, I really feel like we need more voices like this in the news. We need individual stories. We don't need big stories from above about policy and politicians. We need to see how we're all connected and how similar we are in so many ways. And I think it's much easier to bomb people that you don't know. Part of me trying to connect people in this way is to try to be a voice for the voiceless and let people that don't usually get heard have a say. And so I've often done a lot of work with children. And now I'm going to show you a film.
عمري 8 وعمي 8 من العراق للشام.
أنا تركت العراق لأن صارت حرب داعش.
من سوريا. أنا من سوريا. عمري 7. بشدة يا ولد. مادة المفضلة مرجوحة. أكثر الأرض لأن ما فيها داعش ولا مفجرات.
لأن هنيك دخلوا علينا منتمين وأخذوا بابا وأخذوا عمامي 4 وجدوا معاهم. بعدين بينا بيت جدي وأعطينا مصاري لهم حكوا وجدكم معاهم وما لقينا جدي لهلا. بس طلعوا عمامي وأبوي.
اتصلت أمي بسرعة كان في عندنا خالي قس قال بسرعة اطلعوا من السقف. قلنا ليش؟ قال لنا داعش وصلوا عند البطناية.
يعني مع ماما وعمي ماهر.
وين بابا؟
بسوريا.
ليش ضل بابا بسوريا؟
لأنه حطوه بالسجن.
خايفة حتى أخوي صار يخاف. نحن اجينا على الأردن من الخوف كتير.
خوف من داعش يتلقينا. هاي كانت تفجرت كلها ما في حدا فيها. مثل طيارة بتضرب تغصب على البيوت. يعني ضلهم حاصرين المنطقة كل هدول الأمن. ناس مقتولة وناس عايشة. جاء عليها شظايا وماتوا.
بحلم يعني هيك بحلم يكون كله هذا حلم نرجع على بيوتنا ما بدي نظل هيك، نرجع على العراق.
ومين ال 11
ما بيعطوني ما بيعطوني انا
نور، ليه ما تروحي على المدرسة أنت هون؟
لانه بيهم فلوس هواي وغالية وغالية كل المدارس.
بشرى مروة سنة كويس.
انا بحب اكون عسكري لاحمي الوطن.
أنا لما أكبر أريد أصير مهندس.
معلمة. طباخ.
أشتغل مع ماما.
شو بتعمل الماما؟
نطل.
أنا أحب أكبر أطلع الأولى بروح الجامعة وبصير طبيبة أطفال.
هات خلص منيحة هاي ما؟
مو مع الفتحة كثير.
Yeah, these are my little cutie pies. It's so lovely to see all of your faces meet their faces. Often, you don't see people watching the things that you make, so I like to see that. Even though there's a screen between you and them, there's also a connection through the heart. And I think that, as human beings, our empathy is one of the most powerful tools that we have. So while there have definitely been a lot of tears on this job and exposure to a lot of sadness, what keeps me going is the bravery and the selflessness that I've seen all over the world. It's the flip side of this job that people often don't realize, the kindness of strangers. I get to meet people that are braver than any Hollywood action hero, people who have undergone epic journeys of survival, and I feel profoundly honored for that. I now live pretty much between Toronto and the Middle East, a disconnect that is fabulous and confusing and places me in the sort of discombobulated headspin that I feel most comfortable in. I grew up between worlds, and I continue looking and investigating, and my journey continues. And I know that you, my fellow human beings, will keep fascinating me with your stories, inspiring me with your courage, and moving me with your compassion. Thank you.